The Menendez trial wasn't just about two brothers who killed their parents. It was about two brilliant women locked in the legal battle of their careers. Leslie Abramson, the fiery defense attorney who believed in redemption. Pamela Bozanich, the ice-cold prosecutor who believed in justice. Both were at the top of their profession. Both were ruthless, and only one could win. What happened between them in that courtroom didn't just decide the brothers' fate. It changed how America prosecutes abuse claims forever. 1943, Chicago, Illinois. Leslie Hope Abramson was born into a working-class Jewish family. Her father was a salesman. Her mother was a homemaker. They had modest means but high expectations. Leslie was brilliant from the start. Top of her class. Fierce. Opinionated. Unafraid. She went to UCLA, then Loyola Law School. She graduated in 1969, a time when female lawyers were rare and often dismissed. But Leslie refused to be dismissed. She started her career as a public defender in Los Angeles. She took cases nobody else wanted. The violent ones. The hopeless ones. The ones where the defendant was clearly guilty. And she won. Again and again and again. Her reputation grew. Brilliant cross-examiner. Aggressive courtroom style. Passionate defender of the accused. Never backed down from a fight. By the 1980s, Leslie Abramson was one of the most famous criminal defense attorneys in America. She had defended mob member murderers, white-collar criminals. She won acquittals in cases that seemed unwinnable. Her philosophy: everyone deserves a defense, no matter what they did, no matter how hated they are. That's what the Constitution says, and I take that seriously. Her critics said she defends monsters. She has no moral compass. Leslie's response: I defend human beings. The system calls them defendants. And yes, I fight like hell for them. That's my job. By 1993, Leslie Abramson was 50 years old, at the peak of her career. Wealthy, famous, respected, but she'd never had a case like the Menendez brothers. 1950, Pamela Bozanich was born in California. Unlike Leslie's working-class background, Pamela came from a more privileged family. She was educated, poised, controlled. She went to UCLA for undergrad, then Loyola Law School, the same school as Leslie, just years apart. But where Leslie chose defense, Pamela chose prosecution. Why prosecution? In a later interview, Pamela explained, defense attorneys represent one person. Prosecutors represent everyone. Society, victims, the people who can't fight for themselves. I wanted to be on that side. Pamela joined the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office in the late 1970s. She was methodical, precise. She built cases brick by brick. She didn't showboat, she just won. By 1993, she had prosecuted multiple murder cases, high-profile fraud cases, organized crime cases. Her conviction rate was exceptional. Her reputation: brilliant legal strategist, calm under pressure, ruthless cross-examiner, no emotion, just fact. Her courtroom style: where Leslie was fire, Pamela was ice. Where Leslie screamed and pounded tables, Pamela spoke quietly and precisely. Where Leslie made juries feel, Pamela made them think. Her philosophy: my job is to present the truth, not to manipulate emotions. The evidence speaks for itself. When the Menendez case landed on her desk, Pamela Bozanich saw it clearly. Two wealthy kids murdered their parents for money. Open and shut. She had no idea she was about to face the fight of her career. March 1990. Lyle and Erik Menendez had just been arrested. They needed lawyers. The best money could buy. Erik's family hired Leslie Abramson. When Leslie first met Erik in jail, she saw something unexpected. Not a cold-blooded killer, but a broken young man. Erik told her about the abuse, the fear, the years of suffering. Leslie believed him. I've represented hundreds of killers, she later said. I can tell when someone's lying. Erik wasn't lying. She took the case. Not for the money, for the principle. Lyle hired Jill Lansing, who would later be replaced by Leslie for part of the defense strategy, though both brothers had separate counsel during trial. Meanwhile, the DA's office assigned Pamela Bozanich to prosecute. When Pamela reviewed the evidence, she saw premeditated shotgun purchases, fake alibis, $700,000 spending spree. After murders, no evidence of abuse. She saw two liars who murdered their parents and invented a defense. This is the most transparent case I've ever seen, she told colleagues. The stage was set. But when these two women finally faced each other in court, something unexpected happened. The trial became less about the brothers and more about a fundamental question. What is justice? July 1993. The trial began. Pamela Bozanich's opening statement. She stood calmly at the podium. No theatrics, just facts. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, This case is about two things: greed and murder. On August 20th, 1989, Lyle and Erik Menendez walked into their family room with loaded shotguns. They shot their father 6 times. They shot their mother 10 times. When she tried to crawl away, they reloaded and shot her in the face. Why did they do this? Money, $14 million. They planned it. They bought the guns days before. They created an alibi. They called 911, pretending to be shocked. And then they spent the money. Cars, watches, trips, $700,000 in 2 months. The defense will tell you a story about abuse. Don't be fooled. This is murder. Cold-blooded, calculated murder. And that's what you'll convict them of. She sat down, no emotion, just devastating clarity. Leslie Abramson's opening statement. She stood up, looked at each juror individually, then began, I want you to imagine something. Imagine you're 6 years old. Your father comes into your room. He touches you. He tells you it's normal. He tells you if you tell anyone, something terrible will happen. Now imagine that continues. For years, you're 8, 10, 12, 15. Imagine your mother knows, and she does nothing. Imagine you live in fear every single day of your life. Fear that if you resist, you'll be killed. Fear that if you tell, no one will believe you. That was Lyle and Erik Menendez's life. Did they kill their parents? Yes, they're not denying that. But they killed them because they believed, truly believed, that if they didn't, they would be killed themselves. This isn't murder. This is survival. She paused. Let it sink in. The prosecution wants you to focus on money, on spending, but I want you to focus on something else. What it takes to survive years of abuse. What it does to your mind, your sense of safety, your ability to think clearly. Lyle and Erik Menendez are not cold-blooded killers. They're victims who fought back. The jury was riveted. The battle had begun. The trial became famous not for the testimony, but for the cross-examinations. Leslie and Pamela were both masters of this art, and they used it to destroy each other's cases. Leslie cross-examining prosecution witnesses. When the prosecution called a family friend who testified that Jose was a wonderful father, Leslie went for the throat. Leslie, you were at their home. How many times per year? Witness, maybe 5 or 6. Leslie, so you saw them about 30 hours total, over the course of several years. Witness, I suppose. Leslie, and you're telling this jury that in those 30 hours, you know everything that happened in that house. Witness, well, no, but, Leslie, you didn't live there. You didn't sleep there. You didn't see what happened when the doors were closed. Yet you're here telling us Jose was wonderful. Witness, he seemed wonderful to me. Leslie, seemed exactly. Thank you. No further question. Pamela cross-examining Erik Menendez. When Erik testified about the abuse, Pamela was surgical. Pamela, Mr. Menendez, you claim your father abused you from age 6 to 18? Erik, yes. Pamela, 12 years of abuse? Erik, yes. Pamela, and in those 12 years, you never told a teacher? Erik, no. Pamela, never told a doctor? Erik, no. Pamela, never called the police? Erik, I was scared. Pamela, but you told Dr. Ozell after you murdered your parents? Erik, yes, because, Pamela, so you could tell a therapist, but not police, not a teacher, not anyone who could actually help you before you committed murder? Erik struggled to answer. Pamela, Mr. Menendez, isn't it true that you invented this abuse story after you were arrested? Erik, no, it's true. Pamela, you expect this jury to believe that you were so traumatized, so terrified, that you couldn't tell anyone for 12 years, but then, after murdering your parents, you spent $700,000 on luxury items? Erik, I was in shock. Pamela, shocked enough to buy a Porsche? The courtroom was silent. But the most explosive moment came when Leslie and Pamela clashed directly, and what happened next nearly got Leslie thrown off the case. Mid-trial, tensions between Leslie and Pamela reached a breaking point. The incident. Leslie was cross-examining a prosecution witness. Pamela kept objecting. Judge, sustained. Leslie, Your Honor, this is the 10th objection in 5 minutes. The prosecution is trying to prevent the jury from hearing the truth. Pamela, Your Honor, the defense is badgering the witness. Leslie spun toward Pamela. I am not badgering anyone. I'm doing my job. Something you'd understand if you cared about justice instead of convictions. Judge Mauden missed Abramson. That's enough. Pamela remained calm. Your Honor, I move for sanctions against defense counsel for unprofessional conduct. Leslie, unprofessional? You're prosecuting abuse victims, and you're calling me unprofessional? Judge Miss Abramson, one more outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. Leslie sat down, furious. After court, reporters caught them. Reporter to Pamela, Miss Bozanich. Miss Abramson seems very passionate. Do you think she's lost objectivity? Pamela, I think Miss Abramson is an excellent attorney, but passion doesn't change facts, and the facts are clear. Her clients murdered their parents. Reporter to Leslie, Miss Abramson, how do you respond? Leslie, Pamela Bozanich is a smart lawyer, but she's also heartless. She's prosecuting 2 boys who were raped by their father. If that doesn't bother her, I don't know what will. The media loved it. The Battle of the Lady Lawyers became a headline, but both women hated the sexist coverage. Leslie later said, they would never call it the Battle of the Gentlemen Lawyers if we were men. But because we're women, it's a catfight. Pamela agreed. It's demeaning. We're professionals. This isn't personal. It's a trial, but it felt personal. Leslie's strategy. Make the jury feel. Leslie knew the facts weren't on her side. The brothers bought guns. They planned the murders. They spent the money. So she focused on emotion. She put Erik on the stand for days. Let him cry. Let him break down. Let the jury see his pain. She called psychological experts who explained trauma, how abuse victims don't act rationally, how fear can drive people to extreme actions. She showed the jury photos of Erik as a child. This is who Jose Menendez abused. She played the tape of Erik's therapy session with Dr. Ozel. Let the jury hear his confession in his own broken voice. Her goal, make the jury empathize so much that they couldn't convict for first-degree murder. Pamela's strategy, make the jury think. Pamela knew she couldn't out-emotion Leslie, so she didn't try. She focused on logic. She presented a timeline. August 18, brothers buy guns. August 19, brothers load guns. Hide them. August 20 trend, brothers execute parents. August 21 October, brothers spend $700,000. She showed receipts, bank statements, credit card bills. She called witnesses who testified the brothers seemed happy, not traumatized. She played the 911 call. Listen to Lyle. Does he sound scared? Or does he sound like he's acting? Her goal, make the jury think past the emotion and see the calculated murder. Pamela Bozanich's closing. Ladies and gentlemen, Leslie Abramson is one of the best lawyers in America. She's given a passionate defense. She's made you feel for these young men. But feeling isn't the same as truth. The truth is, Lyle and Erik Menendez murdered their parents in cold blood. They planned it, they executed it, they spent the money. Everything else, the abuse claims, the fear, the trauma, was invented after they were arrested. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment. Look at the evidence. Look at the facts. Find them guilty of first-degree murder, because that's what they committed. Leslie Abramson's closing. Pamela Bozanich is right about one thing. This case is about truth. But the truth isn't just facts. It's also context. Yes, Lyle and Erik killed their parents. They've never denied that. But why they did it matters. They did it because they were abused for years, because they were terrified, because they believed their father would kill them if they didn't act first. That's not murder. That's imperfect self-defense. I'm not asking you to excuse what they did. I'm asking you to understand it. Find them guilty of manslaughter, not murder, because they're not cold-blooded killers. They're victims who couldn't escape. The jury deliberated for weeks, and when they came back with their verdict, it shocked both lawyers and the entire nation. January 1994, after months of deliberation, the jury announced, "We cannot reach a verdict." Hung jury, mistrial. Half the jury believed Leslie. They wanted manslaughter. Half the jury believed Pamela. They wanted first-degree murder. No one budged. Pamela's reaction, publicly, she was professional. "We respect the jury's process. We'll retry the case." Privately, she was devastated. She'd never had a hung jury before. She told colleagues, "I can't believe they bought the abuse story. The evidence was overwhelming." Leslie's reaction. Publicly, she was cautious. "This isn't a victory. My clients are still in jail." But it shows the jury had reasonable doubt. Privately, she was hopeful. If half the jury believed them, maybe the next jury would too. 1995, the second trial began. But this time, everything was different. New rules from the judge. Limited abuse testimony. Couldn't be as detailed. No separate juries for each brother. First trial had 2 juries. Less media coverage. O.J. Simpson trial was dominating. These changes hurt the defense. Leslie couldn't make the emotional impact she'd made before. And Pamela had learned from the first trial. She was sharper, more aggressive. She attacked the abuse claims directly. If Erik was so traumatized, she argued, why did he compete in tennis tournaments days after the murders? Why did he smile in photos? She showed the jury those photos. Erik smiling at a restaurant. Lyle laughing with friends. These are not traumatized victims. These are celebratory killers. The verdict. April 1996. The jury found Lyle and Erik Menendez guilty of first-degree murder. Pamela had won. Leslie had lost. What happened to Pamela Bozanich? After the trial, Pamela expected career advancement. She'd won one of the most high-profile cases in American history, but it didn't happen. She left the DA's office in 1997. She went into private practice. She rarely gives interviews. She stayed out of the spotlight. In one of her few public statements, she said, "I did my job. I represented the victims, Jose and Kitty Menendez. They deserve justice. I have no regrets." What happened to Leslie Abramson? Leslie became more famous than ever, but not in a good way. She was praised by some as a champion of abuse victims, but criticized by others as someone who helped murderers escape justice. She continued practicing law, but the Menendez case haunted her. In 2001, she was accused of tampering with evidence in another case. The allegations were serious. Her reputation was damaged. She semi-retired from criminal defense. In a 2005 interview, she said, "I believe Lyle and Erik were abused. I still believe that, but I couldn't save them from life sentences. That's something I'll carry forever." She's now in her 80s. She rarely speaks publicly, but she never stopped believing in the Menendez brothers. The Menendez trial changed American law in several ways. 1 point, abuse defenses. The case showed that abuse claims can be powerful, but also that juries are skeptical without strong evidence. 2, male victims. For the first time, a major trial centered on male sexual abuse victims. It opened conversations that hadn't happened before. 3, courtroom drama. The Leslie versus Pamela dynamic showed how lawyers can become as famous as their clients. 4 point, media trials. The Menendez case was one of the first trial of the century moments. It paved the way for O.J. Casey Anthony and others. Conclusion: 2 lawyers, 2 legacies. Leslie Abramson and Pamela Bozanich were both brilliant. Both believed they were fighting for justice, but they had very different definitions of what justice meant. For Pamela, justice meant holding people accountable for their actions, no matter their background, no matter their excuses. Jose and Kitty were murdered. Their killers should pay. For Leslie, justice meant understanding context, seeing people as more than their worst moment. Lyle and Erik were abused. They should be shown mercy. Who was right? Maybe both. Maybe neither. But what's certain is this: these 2 women gave everything they had to this case. And in doing so, they showed us that the pursuit of justice is never simple. In every trial, there are 2 lawyers fighting for opposite outcomes. But sometimes, they're both fighting for the same thing: to be heard, to be believed, to win. Leslie Abramson and Pamela Bozanich didn't just fight for their clients, they fought for their vision of justice. And in that courtroom, only one vision could prevail.